Welcome to Dominate Your Day. This is the podcast for corporate leaders, visionaries, and founders who are ready to lead from within. I'm Dana Williams, and after 25 years as a corporate leader myself, I've discovered a powerful truth. The next level of your leadership isn't about more doing, it's about more being. Today, you'll hear from a difference maker who's learned that everything they needed to transform their team and their organization was already within them. They've stopped chasing external validation and started leading from their authentic strengths, purpose, and values. This is what I like to call the internal revolution. It's leading authentically from the inside out. Now let's dive in. In this episode of Dominate Your Day podcast, I speak with Adam McGraw. He's the CEO of Crew, which is a private, purpose-driven community for senior executive leaders. Adam's story is rooted in something we talk about often on the show, the idea that real change starts from within. After years spent first in the corporate world and then as an executive coach, Adam noticed this consistent thread. Leaders at the top were craving more, not just more status or salary, but more meaning. They wanted space to ask deeper questions, be vulnerable, and connect in a real way. And that's exactly why Adam created Crew. Let's welcome Adam to the show. Welcome to Dominate Your Day. Today I have Adam McGraw with me. And Adam and I share something very common, and that's the human, authentic side of leadership and being your authentic self at work every day and at home and throughout your life. And it takes a journey, right, Adam, to get there. It's hard work. It's
right.
not easy. But I would love for you to share, Adam, your story. You come from corporate life and then have built a really unique community. And I want to get into that today and have you share that with our audience today. So welcome to Dominate Your Day. And thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Dana. Excited to be here. Looking forward
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah. So tell us, you were at American Express, I guess, for years, executive. What happened? What did you decide? What was going on in your soul when you said something's up and I need to do something with myself? It's something different.
Yeah, I think for me, the journey with American Express, which was an awesome one because great company. I kind of grew up there. I started there around 27 years old, but on it, quite frankly, the journey that eventually I think unveiled itself with me there, as I was climbing up from individual contributor roles into leadership roles, was that I really never wanted to be there. So that was something I actually was, no offense to anyone in these lanes because I've been in
Yeah.
them, but that I did not want to do corporate stuff. I kind of knew that about myself in my college years. So my only goals coming out of college, I always joke, was that I didn't want to do what my dad did growing up. I did not want to be somebody climbing a corporate ladder, as much as I admire him and others that do. That just didn't feel like me. And, like life often does, you go through some twists and your turns, and sometimes you end up in places you said you would never be. And that's actually what happened. And then I enjoyed it. I found that once I got in there, my entrepreneurial spirit, which is, I think, the thing that made me a little bit timid about going down a corporate path. I'm an only child. I've been moving my whole life. So I'm in parts of me, I'm a little bit of a lone wolf. So kind of fitting under a big corporate umbrella didn't seem like that was going to be natural. There are companies like Amex, though, and there are roles within these companies that you can find your stride and really balance being an entrepreneurial spirit at your core and being able to fit within the confines of a corporate mission as well. And I think that was a harmony I was able to find for a good amount of my time there that I did enjoy, and I definitely grew because of all the smart people that I interacted with internally, plus that we got to interact with in revenue positions with all the cool, smart, interesting customer bases that Amex has. But one day I pick up a book in the airport and it's random and it's kind of jumping out at me in the kiosks as a #1 New York Times bestseller for about 2 years straight, called Positive Intelligence. And I go from being a guy that never picked up a book in the airport to buying it one day. And it's kind of one of those moments you wonder, like, why did that happen? But I did. I thought it was just going to be a good read because it was an extensive amount of neuroscience and positive psychology research with 500,000 people across 50 countries out of Stanford around how all of us as imperfect people do things on a routine basis when we're in stress and adversity and change and all, which is kind of every day as we're older, that
Absolutely.
are very subconscious and automatic and are psychologically soothing mechanisms we've been doing since we were kids. And they work because they do get you through it. You survive your hard stuff growing up and in life, but they also, if you can zoom out, have a lot of collateral damage, and they inhibit what our peak potential is in productivity angles, relationships, maybe most importantly, our happiness and fulfillment. So, I mean, picking up the book that day when I was a director at Amex and randomly reading it, and it was so gripping. It was so accurate, uncomfortably for me, because it spoke to all the things I've struggled with underlyingly my entire life since my earliest memories. And that's kind of where the journey started to take a sidestep, I guess, because I felt compelled to reach out to the author, again, something I never did before or after. I was able to get a hold of him, and I cold called him, and we have a meeting, and he was a lecturer at Stanford on this subject back then. He was the CEO of the largest executive coach training company in the world called CTI. And we had an amazing first meeting, a 2-hour Zoom, where we just totally connected. And I told him I wish I had this stuff as an athlete growing up, because I was always in my own head in high pressure moments, and I knew it, and I wanted to be better. And all I would get was no shit advice from everybody, right? Focus on what you can control, shake it off, keep your head up. Of course I knew that, right? That's why, it was annoying to honestly hear that kind of advice in those kinds of moments. And I wanted to be better about those, but I didn't have an operational structure to improve on. And now I was in a blue chip atmosphere with all the best in class training, coaching, development tools in the world, but we did not talk about anything like this. This was, root level behavioral dynamics of human beings and where they begin and how hard it is to change them. So he invited me into a journey with a group of executives that was transformational. Unlike anything I'd ever experienced. There's nothing I did in my educational upbringing or anything I got in a commercial setting, training or development wise, that even comes close to the introspective work and personal and professional implication that this stuff did. And that took me on that. So anyhow, there's my prelude into kind of awesome run at Amex, but started to take a little bit of a pivot.
That's so interesting. So most people, you're like the second person I've heard that's told a story like this, that went back and changed. Roy from GSM there in Austin, who was our ad agency at Southwest, he read a book, I think it was called Built to Last. He read it on a plane, got off the plane, did the same thing, called the author.
Really?
Changed everything. If you go into the headquarters of GSM today, you'll see, and
That's so cool.
Their purpose is right there from that book. Right? So there's those moments that just happen in our life, like what you're describing, and you didn't know why, but you just picked up the phone and called him, and then had this amazing conversation, and then he's got you into this group.
Yep.
Fast forward today, you've left American Express.
Yep.
You now are running your own community. Is that correct? Tell us about
it is. I mean, it was, this decision for Crew, for this executive community, is kind of a third piece of that, because the work I did with him was great, but I was still 7 years that I stayed there at Amex after that, because I thought I might never leave.
Sure.
Then I finally made the jump to work with him, because he and I both kind of felt that moment where now was the time to figure it out, and he was ready to scale, and he had an app platform, and then he was enterprise-wide at Procter & Gamble, and I was
So that was 7 years that y'all were together?
7 years of friendship. Nothing but friendship and authentic connection. So, and it's important. These are important details for me, because so much of what I've bought into personally and tried to create a vision around for Crew, this authentic executive networking community, comes from the personal experiences that I had, right? Because the random association, to your point, right, of reaching out to somebody that arguably you have no business connecting to, or that is not in your arena or lane, nurturing a relationship with nothing being initially reciprocated other than back and forth kind of connection and support for 7 years. Then eventually, yes, an idea and a business like concept emerged for both of us where we join together, and then I leave and I go to work with him in a bootstrap startup setting, and made that tough decision to leave all that hard-earned equity on the table with Amex. But even after a year after that, because COVID hit 6 months into my decision,
Oh my
so
gosh.
perfect timing as always.
Oh yeah.
And with that, I pivoted a year after my move with him because of his coaching. So the power of coaching hit me again. He had to coach me to leave, first of all, because I don't know that I would have done it without really powerful external perspective, views, and advice to get me to think outside of my own head. And then once I was a year into working with him and had made this major life pivot and decision, iteration, right? The ability to like know that, well, what I did a year ago, maybe this isn't what I'm going to do. Maybe I'm going to do something a little different with this decision. And that was through his coaching and advice too. So then I go off on my own we'd created an executive coaching model on the back of the research that he had initially, revealed through his best-selling book. And we created these credentials that coaches could use. And I was one of the first coaches to go off and showcase this new, very unique coaching platform. And I did that through the COVID years. So I did it for 4 to 5 years. And it was in that journey, that coaching journey, so kind of the second pivot after leaving Amex, where I started connecting the need for peer-to-peer ecosystems and unconditional and consistent support. So if that's it, it's just this one thing led to another, and nothing, there's no way I would have predicted this, right? There's no way, and I there's so many lessons I've gotten out of that makes me that I take into the inspiration of the vision for our network of the importance of putting yourself out there, connecting with people, staying committed, building deep-rooted relationships, and then just staying open-minded to where life takes you, right? It's not always a perfect roadmap.
No,
Sorry.
but I think, Adam, you're out there in the marketplace. I'm out there. There's probably not one day that goes by I'm not getting a call from somebody. How did you do this? How do you leave corporate? How do you,
Yeah.
what are the things you learned? How do you make, because there's, as different people are ready for that next chapter in their lives, and there's maybe not a corporate situation, or there might have been a layoff, or there might have been just a whole transformation in business. And I think the lessons you're saying, and you haven't even pulled them out yet, but what I'm hearing you say is that just when you go with one focus, another offshoot could come from that, right? From your coaching, and then it's getting out there
Yeah.
and being yourself authentically, and taking the courage just to be
Yeah.
yourself, right? And just be ready for that next thing. Is that what
Yeah,
you feel?
I think just, the hardest part is I think just figuring out like the lane you want to go down. And I think that is what I did figure out at some point in the Amex journey, and with the book that led to the coaching, that led to the relationship with this guy that was in a lane that I kind of fascinated and dreamed about being a part of, It was the favorite part of like all the stuff I had done commercially, the leadership stuff, the EQ stuff, all that, so, and it was like, well, I'm just going to get in that lane, Sometimes you just got to go down the lane. You don't know exactly where it's
Right.
going. You just know, I know there's good mountains down in the distance here. Which one I'm going to end up going up, that you don't always know. And I did not necessarily know, but I was like, but this was the next best thing that was at least much further down that deep root lane of things I love and was passionate about. And yeah, staying curious, staying open-minded, paying attention to the signs and the people that drop into your life. I don't think creativity and innovation to me has always been connecting. I think the majority of people, there's a few people that are like, they build something from literal scratch, and those people are absolute geniuses that we look up to for generations, But the average person, which that's probably what I would call myself, innovation and creativity and, your vision and wisdom and all that is just connecting,
Right.
seeing the things and the people around you, and then kind of putting those things together, and now getting your idea and getting your clarity and getting your vision of where you're going to go and why, and that is what
It
I feel
is
like I did.
And it is a brave step because you don't, there's so much unknown. While there's a lot of unknown in corporate, there's some kind of known things, but
Oh
there's
yeah.
just so much unknown. So you talked a teeny bit, and I heard it, of your childhood, a little bit of sports. Is that what I heard?
Yeah,
You were in sports.
correct.
Can you see the red thread of consistency from youth, high school, college, where you are now? What is the pattern that you've seen that you maybe played it itself out in sports? It might have been you were a leader in one of
Yeah,
those areas, but there was something that's repeated itself that when we look back at our life map, we can see, oh my gosh, there's the pattern. What is
sure.
your pattern that you've kind of seen? It might be the being curious, stepping out. It might be leading. What kind of patterns do you see when you think through that?
Well, the non-dysfunctional pattern, because I have a lot of dysfunctional patterns that I could definitely trace back to my
Yeah,
earliest like little league
sure.
memories. But the positive pattern that I know happened was, as somebody that was very introverted, very shy, and an only child moving all the time across the country and stuff, the leading people, inspiring others through sports and through right
Mhm.
group stuff that we would do
Team.
together and team stuff was kind of how I found my voice and how I gained my confidence
Hmm.
and really ultimately how I stepped into a vision and an affinity for leadership. So it was that, right? It started there.
Yeah.
I remember a friend, a very good friend of mine, writing something. I don't know. We were third or fourth grade, and he wrote like the person that he admired most, and he wrote about me as his good friend
Wow.
because I helped inspire him to do things that he didn't necessarily think he was capable of. That was my mom always told me that story because I forget
Hmm.
it often, and I guess that was it to your question and your valid point,
Hmm.
how these things do show up pretty early
Hmm.
on in life that you may have maybe you have something here, you know.
Yeah.
At least somebody else maybe sees it and values it, even if you couldn't really see what you were doing and why,
And
you
then you
know.
get to that career, corporate career, and you're kind of doing what everybody says, go to college, do the
Right.
thing, and then something's not feeling right. But then back when you were at fourth grade, there weren't rules around all that. You were just doing what you were naturally gifted to do.
Yeah.
And that was your authentic self. And then when we get into this, oh my gosh, look, I can help make a difference with these people's lives
Yeah.
like I did back then. But it's learning to drop those things. Like you said, there's all this stuff we don't want to bring with us from the past,
Yeah.
right? And you're bringing this other stuff. So and it to me it reminds me of just building a new file. Oh, that was a file. I don't have to do that anymore, but I can do this now. Um, and so as you built your organization over the last 2 years, and right through COVID, that must have been really challenging. Especially when the coaching, that's about when I started too, it was in
Yeah.
2020. So
Yeah.
it was like, whoa. But I thought, what better time to start than a time like this, and really get out there. Talk to us about how you've been developing this unique community and what the purpose is of this community that you're developing.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, it came through the coaching work and the feedback loop that you experience in coaching. You hear and see things, and while you're working with a lot of different types of people and personalities, I was working consistently with a VP and above executive. That was the audience that I had the
Hmm.
privilege of doing all my coaching work with,
Hmm.
primarily. And so I was able to again dot connect and pick up on very common types of thoughts and
Hmm.
things, traits that these folks were sharing with me in confidential, non-political, judge-free settings, which I was allowing us to have. And it was this common thread of underlying wrestling of things, as far as what does success look like for me now versus maybe what it did in my first part of my career 10 years ago. What's fulfilling for me now versus 10 years ago? How do
Hmm.
I eliminate any regrets of things that I'm kind of stirring on still that I was hoping that maybe I could do and try? What's my full legacy going to be at the end of my life and career looking back, given I dedicate 2/3 of my life, if we're lucky, working? These were such common things when you get into a white space introspection atmosphere with the average executive leader below their titles and their money and their resumes on LinkedIn, you will hear about. And then I realized that people really like hearing this from each other because it makes them feel like they're not alone, you know, and it gives, and there's such a relational connection with folks that get it, right? They're in similar shoes as you, similar phases. They have been or will be, you know, kind of a thing. And that's where I saw the need for something. I didn't want to just coach with them for a couple of years and then I was done. So I was trying to think of ways that I could have a longer impact and a broader impact than just being somebody that could work with 20 people at a time for a multi-month experience. And that's where the idea for me for community came into play. And I really built the ethos, quite frankly, we did as a group of early founding folks and members that, you know, is really focused on unique stuff, you know, diversity of leadership instead of always being in our same role or industry or our city or staying with people that look and sound like us. You know, that's a big part. You know, so it's a total diverse ecosystem of leaders, a place where leaders can be totally real and authentic. I just found that there's a lot of fakeness and a lot of politics. I really didn't love it. I tolerated it. But, you know, where can leaders ask dumb questions? Where can they share fears and concerns in a judge-free zone? People need that. They don't have a lot of atmospheres for that with people that get it, right? They got family, but family doesn't always get it. And family's biased. So you need non-biased zones where people also are in the same boat. And then a place where we talk a lot about this meaning and fulfillment category. To your point, Dana, this is a post-COVID world. This is an AI disrupted world. It's a world where the macro arena and geopolitical stage feels as tumultuous as it's ever been in our lifetime. So, you know, introspection happens a lot more during times like this, right? 10 years ago, it was like you're sitting on a treadmill as a consumer, chasing the levels of success that everyone's always defined. But when life kind of gets flipped upside down and all the things that we knew to be stable or certain are no longer that, you think more, you introspect more. And when an average person does that, particularly a leader, they think differently often about success, fulfillment, meaning, purpose, contribution, self-actualization, all those kinds of things. So that's really what we're trying to do, is cultivate an atmosphere where leaders can connect, give, grow, right? Do all the normal networking stuff, don't get me wrong, but also really back into this place from a real personal connection zone and a place where they really feel like, when I come here, I'm putting the oxygen mask on myself. This is for me first and foremost. Then I'll bring it back into my teams and into my families to be a better leader, you know, and all that.
That, you know, you are exactly speaking about what I'm passionate about, which is changing me changes everything else.
Yes.
And getting into the proximity of people that you normally wouldn't be around in your work environment, but people that are going to challenge you and help you grow, but also be there to let you fall and love on you through the human process, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. One of our earliest members, you know, was telling somebody else, one of his peers was asking him, you know, what do you get from Crew, right? You know, what are you doing there? And he said, well, this is my unconditional support system. You know, he said, I didn't realize that the support groups, the peer groups that I had primarily in my career so far were so conditional. They were, you know, people were around me because of the job I was in, or maybe it was who I worked for that they wanted to have close access to, or, you know, whatever these different, they're all conditional reasons. The majority, if you think about your average relationship in your commercial career, there's a lot of conditions around it. And when those conditions change, by the way, relationships often change, you know, and I'm not saying friendships go away forever, but the phone stops ringing a little bit. You know, or a lot, you know, people don't need you as much. You don't need them as much. When those conditions change, so does all the relationship dynamics that you've been spending all this time investing in. So where do you get in a day of constant change, where nothing stays the same anymore, where nobody stays in companies comfortably and stable for 30 years anymore? Where do you get an unconditional glue that you can always plug into when you need it? That is what I think we're doing for folks, right? Is creating a finally, if they're willing to lean in and be a part of it, an unconditional support system, which is really helpful to probably today now more than ever.
And I think that I just came off of a coach's event a couple of weeks ago, and it was interesting because we've gone in and out of a lot of Zoom meetings to now more in person. Everybody wants to be in person. And I think it's this human connection piece. But I mean, I cannot tell you how many different folks that were there just saying, "Can I give you a hug? Can I?" No, I'm like, "Sure, you
Yeah,
can." I'm here. Let's hug. And I think it was that human connection of I just want somebody that knows me and values me and cares about me. It doesn't, and it's just so supportive. But yet, I think we forget that even in our, whether we're still doing virtual or we're in other environments. So, who is that for you?
yeah,
And how are you creating that? And what, who are the people you're putting yourself in that proximity? Who are those people you're putting yourself in with to be challenged with on a regular basis? Otherwise, we're going to go
so true.
stagnant and you're not designing your day, you're just living by default.
That's right. And it's a busy world, and it's a noisy world, and so you're gonna probably find that days and years and decades blow by, and authentic connection and deeper relationships become fewer and further between. It's a little bit of the challenge of the world we're living in, where our heads are down and we're in tunnel
Yeah.
vision a lot more than we were 20 or 30 years ago. And this is a thing that people, when they pop their heads up, when they lose their job, when
Mm-hmm.
things like COVID or macro environment news is real unsettling or uncertain, that's when we tend to notice this. But it's
Mm-hmm.
very easy to catch yourself again down, missing it, quite frankly, staying on a treadmill until you need it. And so I think we're just trying to help people think about this whole approach of authentic connection more proactively and realize there's major benefits here. And yes, underlyingly, I think most of us are craving it, particularly around a very relatable audience, you know? Um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So you've kind of did the corporate thing, you left and did the coaching thing, and now you've started this whole community. Where do you see this going?
It's funny. I mean, I get people a lot of times will ask, what's the vision? What's the long-term play? I, I would love to tell you that I have some amazingly baked vision like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, but I don't. I don't.
And that's okay.
Yeah, and I didn't 10 years ago of
Yeah.
this either. And I'm kind
Right.
of trusting that, quite frankly,
Yeah.
because I've just watched the last 12 years for me, more than that, quite frankly, just continue to unveil itself. And all I want to keep doing is keep staying in the lane that brings me growth, that brings me meaning, that brings me fulfillment, joy, purpose. If I stay in that lane, I'm going to keep feeling like what I'm doing matters. I'm
Hmm.
probably going to be somebody that is hopefully impactful to others and
Hmm.
right has a positive interaction kind of thing for everyone, and it'll figure itself out. And you know that's
And
kind of
that's
my
the
goal.
no, but that's the permission slip is you don't have to have it figured out.
Yeah.
It's just get in where your passion is and your giftedness is and your talents and trust the faith that you've got and get yourself in the right kind of people and community. So
Yeah.
as we get ready to close out, can you tell the group about what your community's called and kind of what the purpose is as we get ready, and then if they're interested in learning more about it?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. It's called Crew, um, which was a name I came up with over coffee randomly one day when I wanted a really good name that really embodied what I was envisioning of this authentic, unconditional connection zone for leaders. And I think it does that fairly well. So Crew is the name, crewexec.com. Crewexec.com is our website. And we're very active on LinkedIn. So we got a, small but mighty, kind of deal that we do together and flywheel with each other support wise on the LinkedIn platform, where most of our obviously audience sits and watches at least. And we're for anybody that's kind of a VP and above, generally speaking, leader, 12 to 15 years in a career zone of as an executive lane. And really, we're open to all roles and industries, all company types. We really want an eclectic, diverse community atmosphere. We've got a good blend of all kinds of industries, all kinds of role charters, startup folks, enterprise folks. We're almost half women to men, so the
Mm-hmm.
ratio is improving through the day. So diversity model, it's also a personal and professional blend, support atmosphere. Really want leaders to feel like, again, this is my time, my place with the right relatable audience where I can talk about
Mm-hmm.
anything, personally or professionally. We're all trying to do everything well, And most of us are not able to do everything well. We have a leaky bucket, and we get to talk through that. We open up about that. We're vulnerable and open. And what's great is that's how we cultivate true community, because when you hear about not just the good of everyone, you connect with them, you relate, you support, and there's emotional bonding that happens. So we see acceleration of trust and friendships going on in here. And that's a real network, by the way, right? Folks you know, like, and trust. And then the third, and then the other piece is we're very focused on meaning and fulfillment, not just titles and money. You know, if you have an ethos that's focused on titles and money, you're going to be steering people down a wrong lane, in my opinion. And I feel strongly about that. And I want everyone to make money. Okay, we're not an anti-money, anti-title organization. We want to help people get to big jobs. We want to help people maximize their commissions and knock down operational roadblocks. But I'm more interested in if what they're doing actually is something they enjoy, and if they find meaning and purpose, and if it's eliminating things that they might regret down the road. Because if it's not, it's all in vain. Because that's what was happening for me. I was going to keep climbing. I was going to keep making money. I was going to keep trying to win awards and getting promoted. But I was not going to be down a lane for me that was happy and fulfilled. And that was not going to be success, no matter what it looked like on paper. That was going to be the biggest failure of my life, because I would have been misleading myself and ultimately others by not living a life true to myself. So this isn't about meaning you got to leave corporate, because, like I said, I think I don't know that I should have ever done it, right? I'm glad I did, but it's about just knowing when to move, knowing when to pivot, knowing how to approach your version of success, defining it on your own. Like, these are the kinds of things that we really give leaders white space to think about and figure out in a day of constant change and movement, of course, where you're going to have to keep redefining yourself and success, because the world's going to force you to. You're not going to get to just stay comfy and stable for 30 years. Those days are gone. So, so anyhow, it's a community for folks that might be interested in things like that. And I'm an introvert, so it's definitely, I think, an introvert that can be an extrovert when I'm in the right room. And Absolutely. I think it's a room that plays to the extroverts and the introverts. And you know, we do a ton of stuff virtually. We do a lot of great stuff in person. So it's a foundational phase. It's a ton of fun. It's a very intentional community of what we call intellectually curious go-givers. So very unique kinds of persona in here. So yeah, if anyone's interested, I mean, I'm always accessible on LinkedIn personally. I still meet with every prospective member, or my co-founder and chief connections officer does. And we're absolutely always enrolling folks that are inspired by the ethos and the mission.
I love it. I love it how mission driven it is. And I love that you're you're in your core authentic purpose, that it doesn't matter what's next, because you're following that purpose. And that's the key there, right? So as we close out, Adam, anything that I didn't ask you that's coming up for you right now that you want to make sure our audience hears?
No, I think other than what I've picked up from you, Dana, and I know you can relate to this because you're following your passions as well.
Yeah.
Is, you know, basically all I know, and it keeps getting reinforced, is that life is going to be constantly hard, and it's going to constantly test you. And that's no matter whether you're an entrepreneur, because quite frankly, this is 10 times harder than any corporate job I got way overpaid for. So, or whether you're in a corporate job and there's all kinds of change and all kinds of bureaucracy, or whether you're in between jobs and you're stressed out about all of the uncertainty and all that, life is just constantly hard. And you have to find outlets and consistent proximity and operational modes that you can lean on that helps you handle the hard part, that helps you gamify some of the hard part, find joy in the journey and in the process, because that's the only guarantee, right? There's no grass is greener. You do have to just learn how to enjoy all the phases of your career and life, and just keep trying to figure out how you find more joy and instill. As a leader, you have then the privilege of, if you can do that, you work on yourself first, to your point. Now I can go out and I can instill the same type of joy, meaning, and purpose in anybody I have the privilege of interacting with. And that's a powerful combination. But it's going to be hard. And so you just have to figure out how to gamify that. And I think leaning on others is very underestimated in today's day. So,
yeah, finding your team. You've created a team to be with,
Yep.
and finding that team is important, and finding that network, finding that community and those connections. Adam,
Yep.
thanks so much. This has been so fun to hear your story and hear what you've done. And I know it's going to be inspiring for a lot of our followers out there to hear. Even an introvert
That's
can
right.
develop a network.
That's right.
And
Even introvert.
you're one of my other guests, Rachel Simon from AT&T. She did introvert, right? But
Yep.
she's built a program on how you can network in your organization. And so it's the same thing. It doesn't matter if you're introvert or extrovert. It's just seeing the need, feeling it, but going with your passion. So, and
Yeah.
your authentic self. So we appreciate you, Adam. Thanks for being on Dominate Your Day. It was so great to hear your story. Can't wait to hear more about it in the future.
Thanks,
So,
Dana. It was awesome. Thank you for the chat.
sure.
What an incredible conversation. Remember, everything you need to lead with greater impact is already within you. You don't need to be more productive. You just need to be more you. If today's episode resonated, please subscribe and share it with a fellow leader who's ready for their own internal revolution. And if you're ready to discover what's possible when you lead from the inside out, I'd love to create space for that conversation. Head to danawilliamsco.com for resources and to book your free discovery call, where we can explore what you want to achieve for yourself, your team, and your organization. Until next time, keep leading from within.